Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Cavell Group webinar, Accelerating Operator Connect. My name is Patrick Watson. I'm Head of Research here at Cavell Group, and we've got a really great session on the cards for you today. I have a couple of poll questions that I've dispersed throughout today's session, and we'll be using Slido for those. So please do have your mobile phones at the ready, as we want the session to be as interactive as possible. And it's always a good chance for me to capture some data from the industry. So we'll be exploring Microsoft Teams telephony enablement and focusing specifically on Operator Connect. And as I'm joined by a panel of expert guests who represent Microsoft Operator Connect Accelerators, who I'll introduce for you now. I'm joined by Greg.
Patrick, I don't know if anyone else is having audio issues, but I don't hear you.
You have to toggle it again. That happened to me too, and I toggled it again, and it came back in the settings down there in the bottom.
There we go. Any better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Most of the audience can hear you. You're just faint compared to when we were in the back room.
Let me change that out. Any better? Can you hear me? There's always a light teething problem.
You sound very clear, Patrick.
Oh, good. Right. Well, I just did a full 5-minute intro then, which wasted a complete amount of time. Sorry to the audience there, but I will. I'll go through that again. So, first of all, hello and thanks for joining us for this Cavell Group webinar, Accelerating Operator Connect. My name, now that you can hear me, is Patrick Watson. I'm Head of Research here at Cavell Group, and we've got a really great session on the cards for you today. Throughout the webinar today, I've included a couple of poll questions for you, which we'll be using Slido. So please do have your mobile phones ready, and you can scan the QR codes, and we can make the session sort of as interactive as possible. And it's always a great chance for me to capture some industry data. So we'll be exploring Microsoft Teams telephony enablement and focusing specifically on Operator Connect, as I'm joined by a panel of expert guests who represent the Microsoft Operator Connect Accelerators, and I'll introduce them for you now. I'm joined by Greg Zweig, Director of Solutions at Ribbon. How are you, Greg?
Better now.
And can hear you loud and clear, which is always a bonus. Sippio COO, Dawn Marie Elder. Morning, Dawn Marie. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent work. And Mark, my international webinar troubleshooter, Mark Bonnell, COO from Nuwave, also joins us. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
And unfortunately, Dan Pearson from PingCo couldn't be with us for the session, but we have a more than capable stand-in joining us all the way from down under, and it's right in the middle of the night in Australia. So Jeff Coleman, PingCo's Wholesale Director. How are you, Jeff?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you, all good.
Thanks for joining. And last but by no means least, Prabu Nikesh, Director for Product Management at Azure for Operators. Thanks for joining us, Prabu.
Thanks, Patrick. Nice to meet you all.
Excellent. So before we get into the panel discussion, I wanted to provide a bit of context as to why we are hosting this webinar today. And I thought I'd start with a stat, 17 million. It's a pretty big number. And just for some context, that's roughly the equivalent to the entire population of New York State. And that's what we at Cavell Group forecast that the Operator Connect market could grow to cover in terms of Microsoft Teams telephony users over the next few years. So that's providing a pretty large opportunity for the communications industry, and probably the reason that a lot of you have joined the webinar today. So one feature that Teams doesn't include as standard, as you will all know, is telephony capability, which has to be enabled as an add-on via one of 4 routes now: Microsoft Calling Plans, Direct Routing, Operator Connect, or Teams Phone Mobile. And currently, the proportion of Microsoft Teams users that have telephony enabled is actually quite low. It's less than 5% of the sort of overall Teams user base. So it's probably around 15 million telephony enabled users globally. And the vast majority of those users are deployed at the moment via direct routing. That's why on the right-hand side of this, we wanted to provide a little diagram to distinguish on a sort of very basic high level the difference between direct routing, which utilizes SBCs to manage the traffic between teams and carriers, and an Operator Connect, which is effectively cloud-to-cloud peering. As I promised, I did want this session to be interactive, and I know the majority of the audience represent service providers or carriers, and I'm interested to see if you think Microsoft Teams might become your primary voice platform in the future, or if you think it will be part of a sort of multi-solution portfolio. So if you can scan the QR code, that will link through to the Slido poll. And while we wait for some of the answers to come in, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Operator Connect, which provides, as I said, another option to enable telephony within Teams. And Microsoft has witnessed pretty extraordinary growth in terms of the program. And I think the demand for operators to join the program has really exceeded all expectations in terms of the amount of partners that want to be on the panel, and hence the launch of Operator Connect Accelerator program that allows those accredited partners to provide software and services to the operators. And I think the demand to join the OC program is so huge because it provides access to this growing telephony market, and Operator Connect itself will leverage that key Teams self-service within the Teams admin center. So we've had a little bit of time on the Slido poll as I waffle on. And I can see from the results that actually the majority, that's not what I was expecting. The majority, 53% of you, think Teams won't be your core voice platform. That is what I was thinking after all. But it's obviously still of interest to so many of you from a sort of wider portfolio perspective. And I think that's what we're seeing from a lot of service providers, that it's to sort of augment the wider voice portfolio. So I wanted to touch on that just a little bit more, and I thought I'll give you some of our data from the Cavell side. So the graph on the left is from a survey we've conducted at the start of 2023 with over 50 of the world's leading service providers and carriers. And the light green bar in the middle shows that more than 40% of those carriers that we surveyed are planning to offer Operator Connect within the next 12 months. The graph on the right shows our forecast for Teams telephony in North America and Western Europe. And this is actually from our Q2 2022 Cloud Comms market reports. And the updated versions of these will be released in March. So for anyone who's interested in the updated figures, do get in touch. But at the moment, there are around 10 million telephony-enabled users via Teams in the North America and Western Europe. But we expect that to expand pretty significantly over the next 5 years. And the data that we've had back from a Cavell perspective points to the fact that Operator Connect in the long run will probably become the most popular telephony enablement route. And as I said on the first slide, by the end of 2026, our forecasts show that across these regions, Operator Connect could cover more than 17 million users. So I think that just demonstrates how large the potential opportunity is for telcos and service providers, and why there's so much interest in relation to the program. That is more than enough waffle from me. Let's get into the panel discussions with the real experts here. So I wanted to start with a sort of overview of the accelerator program. And Dawn Marie, I'll start with you first, if that's all right. So how did the Operator Connect Accelerator program come about, and how can it help service providers or telcos who are considering Operator Connect?
Sure. I think it came about as Microsoft was working with some of the larger carriers and finding that they needed some guidance and direction to go down the path, especially around some of the customer experience angles. I think all of us here that are on the call today can certainly provide carriers with guidance on how to best approach their Operator Connect go-to-market, as well as the infrastructure, the architecture, all the pieces and parts that Microsoft requires. And I think that all of us, have some best practices under our belts now as well to help customers and carriers just get there quicker with a lot less pain than they may experience on their own.
And Greg, from a Ribbon perspective, you were very early on the accelerator pathway. Is that the main ethos, to assist operators in the sort of process?
Yeah, I think, kind of back to one of your prior slides, Patrick. And for those of you who are less familiar with Ribbon, we're one of the major providers of session border control solutions, for service providers. And one of the things that's important, I think, to appreciate is that, the telephony side of Operator Connect is very well understood. And I would say that the vast majority of service providers out there already have some form of direct routing solution in place. And if they do, then they have the telephony underpinnings for Operator Connect, because there's no big change from a standards perspective or from Microsoft's perspective. What is different is this direct API layer that they put in place, which gives Operator Connect kind of its power. And I think the challenge for many service providers is, the toughest thing for them to do is to get their IT organization to kind of react nimbly to these kinds of requirements. They have a lot of legacy OSS and DSS assets. And so it's hard, even though Microsoft created a really rich set of REST APIs for Operator Connect, it's not like they have a dozen developers standing around with nothing to do all day long and say, okay, I'm just going to integrate this. And so I think Microsoft created the OCA program really so that it gave service providers kind of a bridge so that they could find somebody to help with that piece of it and get into market sooner with an offer.
Mark, from the Nuwave perspective, I suppose accelerator in the name, just sort of speeding that process is a key part of this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a methodical program as you go through to hit all the steps that you have to do to develop a program, not only from the API perspective, but just how are you going to turn up and scale, go to market, launch with the sales training, administrative training. So it's not just connecting some APIs, it's a full program as you go through. And I would even say that, it's not just Operator Connect, because there's use cases out there that everybody has that is going to be Operator Connect based. You're also going to mix in some direct routing because Operator Connect is not available in all areas. And so if you want to service all use cases, you're going to have to mix and match, Operator Connect with direct routing. And then you're even going to have some on-premise, direct routing SPCs that are also part of that equation, like if you're in India and you have Reg or Japan or something like that. And so, Operator Connect is a flavor of Microsoft Teams voice. And so, it's not only getting through, setting that up and having a program, but also taking into account that you're going to have real world use cases of all of the flavors.
Yeah, that hybrid approach is something that we're hearing a lot of, especially in larger enterprises. It'd be very unusual for telephony to be ubiquitous across an entire enterprise. Jeff, anything to add on the accelerator program from a PingCo perspective?
Yeah, I think really it's about speed and cost. One of the big challenges that Greg was talking about was how do you get all of those assets available to create that environment if you're a carrier, and how do you keep at the forefront of development in need of that space? There's lots of evolving needs that need to be catered for in the evolution of the product, and most carriers just don't have the culture to continually evolve their products and services in the same speed that needs to be achieved in the marketplace. And Operator Connect is really just it's the start of that journey for a carrier. There's all of the ecosystem of allied products and services that carriers are wanting to offer to customers for a simple consumption. And for all of the accelerators in this space, that's really how we can differentiate, how we can add value, how we can guide carriers about providing an ecosystem approach that customers can acquire all of the products and services from a single window. And that's the journey they're looking for.
And Prabhu, obviously, Azure for Operators, part of Microsoft, but specifically targeting accelerating operators onto the program in that sense.
Yes, Patrick. So I represent the Azure for Operators organization within Microsoft, and our portfolio is specifically there to to help operators and customers adopt Teams calling, specifically Operator Connect. And we are one of the 6 accelerator partners along with our peers here. So we are very thankful for the peers here who are actually all helping towards the goal of making the adoption of Teams calling easier, right? So from that, I think it's all about improving the customer journey and the operator journey. And I think the peers here all talked about all the major values that the program is adding. I think the key here is that as we all know, not all enterprises, not all operators have the technical skills or the ability to replicate things in a temperatized fashion. So the accelerator partners, we have seen all of us having various flavors of the services, all the way from providing the services to automate things, all the way to having gateways and white label products to, and also provide enhanced routing and monitoring and troubleshooting capabilities. So yeah, that's how I will look at it.
And I wanted to talk about, and we did this briefly in the introduction, and Greg, we talked about this in prior planning, and Mark, you mentioned it in terms of the hybrid environment. What I was sort of thinking about was, if you're a service provider, what would make you consider joining Operator Connect, as well as having your direct routing solution? Because I think everyone on the program so far already has a direct routing solution. I don't think I've seen anyone that doesn't. And Greg, you can come to me first on that. In the meantime as well, I just wanted, in the background, I thought it'd be worth having a poll running just to see what the service, everyone in the audience thinks the sort of key benefits might be to being part of Operator Connect. But Greg, if you're a service provider considering joining Operator Connect, you've got a direct routing solution, what sort of takes you over the edge into doing that?
Well, I think there's a couple things. As I've mentioned before, I think the thing you have to appreciate about Operator Connect is, from a technology perspective, I think this is the beginning. Microsoft sort of led the way in terms of thinking about how to deliver telephony services different. Architecturally, the thing to keep in mind is this solution is cloud to cloud. So you're connecting, the service providers ultimately connecting directly cloud to cloud between themselves and Microsoft. And obviously the OCA partners are a step in between, but you're not bringing dial tone services down to the premises, right? And that's a big deal, because if you think about it, to some extent, if you're a traditional LEC, for instance, a local exchange carrier, it disenfranchises you from some perspective, right? Because you've traditionally, the last mile has been one of your competitive advantages. However, on the other hand, if you're an over-the-top provider, it creates a level playing field. So it definitely changes the dynamics. And now, Prabhu, you're going to have to cover your ears for this part. But the other thing to keep in mind is it's not just Microsoft, right? Zoom has provider exchange program. WebEx has Cloud Connect, right? This is the beginning of an entire trend. I expect that, over time, we're going to see most of the major cloud platforms have this offer, both on the UC side and on the contact center side. It's going to happen. And so I think as a service provider, you have to be prepared for this. And I think Mark made a great point, which is that it's not just preparing for the technology, it's preparing for the whole process across your business. So if you don't get started, somebody else is going to do it. And it's your competitive disadvantage. And by the way, somebody else is doing it. So there are people already in this space.
Mark, I'll come to you on that. So sort of, and I realize you get at Nuwave, you have a sort of diverse amount of drivers of customers that come and want to be part of Operator Connect. What would be sort of some of the primary ones that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I think it's a few things. In the beginning with direct routing, it was a little bit difficult to do tenant validation and bring on users, and that's where we had automated a lot of that process to basically have like an Operator Connect 1.0, but other people didn't necessarily have that, and so then Operator Connect was really created so that you could onboard more customers at scale without doing tenant validation and having to work the PowerShell and things like that. And so this is just, again, another flavor that enables people to, maybe that have less technical expertise and to be able to, generate a program and be part of the team's movement, with less heavy lift. But again, that's one component. It's all about choice. You have to be able to mix and match choice so that you can, truly deliver what customers want, because every single day it seems like we come across a new use case, a new way that somebody's delivering services, and you have to be able to, take those real world applications and then put them into, in our case, iPilot, so that, we can do that. So you can have truly, a single pane of glass to deal with all the different types of use cases that you might come across.
Yeah, it's a pretty diverse, and we can see the poll results coming in at the moment. And I think brand awareness is something that we've heard a lot of from a Cavell perspective. As I said, it's a self-serve portal within the Teams admin center, Operator Connect. So having your logo on there. Dawn Marie, in terms of sort of brand awareness, customers wanting to be part of Operator Connect, are you surprised that that's sort of coming out on top?
I'm not surprised, but it is interesting to see the misnomers that are out there of what people think it is versus what it really is. Some people think it's very much what Mark said earlier, methodology and an approach, which it is. Other people think it's like a marketing sort of tagline to utilize. I hope this person isn't on the call today, so I'll apologize, but I had a traditional MSP come to me yesterday articulating very forcefully that they were in the Microsoft Operator Connect program. And one of the things that I think some people overlook or don't understand is that it's really designed for carriers, service providers, what Microsoft calls operators. And it's not something that should just be loosely written onto an RFP by an end user customer, because there's many paths to putting voice into Microsoft Teams. Operator Connect might be the right path for that customer. Direct routing might be the right path for that customer, or some hybrid type of solution that some of the others talked about might be right. So just to say we're going this and we're doing this without really understanding it and understanding your environment and the requirements of your customer, I think it's a little short-sighted. And that's some of the things that all of us can help carriers really put together in their program and their approach as they're looking at joining the program, and they're looking at what their strategy is going to be for their customer base and how they're going to articulate it.
And Prabhu, from the AFO perspective, sort of key drivers for joining the program, I think we've heard the big ones, and they're on screen there in terms of addressing that new market, addressing that opportunity.
Yeah, I think what we hear from our customers, I think direct routing is going to stay for a while, and there is a place for that in the portfolio. And like I think Greg mentioned earlier, there is going to be a mix of direct routing and Operator Connect users that some enterprises and operators would have to sell for a while, and we understand and acknowledge that. I think what customers like is that being able to have an offer for Operator Connect allows them to put a check mark in RFP responses, right? So customers are starting to ask for Operator Connect for one of or few of three reasons, right? One is the single pane administration management from Teams Admin Center. So being able to go there in one place and being able to select the operator and being able to get your numbers through that, I think that is a key value proposition. And then they also like the brand credibility and awareness that the survey response says, right? So I think that is also critical. And the third one I would say is that Operator Connect comes with the Microsoft backed SLA. And I think that is something that enterprises as well as operators are liking, right? So these, I would say, are some of the key drivers. And I think getting your hands wet to Operator Connect and having an offer to be able to give to enterprises is a key for the future.
And Jeff, from the PingCo perspective, I know you speak to operators all over the world about this. I'm assuming the reasons sort of don't vary geographically. It's along the similar lines of the ones that we've covered off already.
Absolutely. I mean, the messaging is very similar no matter what region operators are from, and there are lots of market segments that are still waiting to be served. If you're a small customer and you're trying to access Teams calling, it's almost impossible to find a service provider who would deal with a 10-man, 20-man company. The return on investment for the carrier, if it's done manually, is just not there. The costs are too great for the small customer. So Operator Connect is fantastic from the perspective of enabling those small customers to get onto a Teams calling platform quickly, easily, with a standardized process, and get on with their day.
Yeah, and I wanted to, and I think the question there is in terms of, that's the whole premise of Operator Connect, really, is that ease of selling and deploying and administrating those users. So I think that was some interesting findings there. So once and Jeff, I'll come back to you on this. So once an operator has decided we've got our direct routing solution, we want to be part of Operator Connect, rather than sort of maybe the administrational side, what would be your sort of next steps in terms of preparing your organization from both a sort of technical and a commercial standpoint in terms of pre-joining Operator Connect, that preparation phase?
It's really about getting all of your ducks in a row. The requirements for providing all of the calling components, all of the automation components, vary from carrier to carrier. And I think the experience that we see most often is that there is great intent or great desire to move in this space very quickly, but the ability to get all of the business case justification, all of the aligned investments ready to go so that a decision can be made is one of the challenges carriers face. And I think ensuring that you have a clear understanding of the markets that you want to serve, the messaging you want to put across, the customers you're going to access, they're clear requirements, and they differ for every customer. And what is that journey going to look like over time? It will evolve past just Operator Connect. There will be Teams Phone Mobile, there'll be Operator Connect for conferencing, there'll be Azure Communication Services. Lots of different components will come into that decision, and it's our guidance is very much look past the current requirement and look at what is the future going to look like and how can we get you there faster.
Yeah, interesting. And Prabhu, from the Azure for Operators perspective, what are those sort of initial criteria when a new operator approaches you? What are those sort of criteria that you'd be talking to them about in terms of the sort of preparatory phase?
Yeah, I think initially to start with, I think a solid business case is critical. So I think preparing the business case is something that I would advise to look at, and then looking into the enhancements or work that will be needed on the backend IT systems and also the business processes. I think working with those teams to understand what your capabilities are and what is the requirements on where the gaps are. And the accelerators here, we all have different flavors of the services. So talk to us, understand your options, understand what is needed and where you are, and see how we can help you. And I think other areas where I think some of the operators find it later in the process is, like, for example, the API is something that has actually caught some of the operators by surprise, and then understanding doing some research and understanding the underlying technical connectivity requirements, right? Like maps, for example, is something that it is good to understand.
I particularly enjoy the business case because, I mean, the first point of that is, market sizing information that you might like to look to your favorite analyst research firm for. So that's normally my little plug there, but I think that's important. Dawn-Marie, from the Sippio perspective, for that sort of initial discussion, technical, commercial, we've heard, a lot of the bases covered there.
Yeah, so I'm a commercial gal, and I always like to start with the end in mind. Most companies are out there to create a revenue stream, right, and offer something compelling to their customers. So we really work with our partners and carriers, looking at what is their total addressable market, who are they selling to, which pieces and parts of that do they think will go down the Microsoft or the Zoom path that need acceleration? What's their go-to-market strategy? What are some of the things that they have to do to change culture or other pieces internal to their business, winning over the hearts and minds of their salespeople to go execute and sell on a new offer? And I think that when you go through some of those exercises and you start to model out price points, sometimes people are way off, over here in the dollar range and they're never going to be profitable, with that, or they're way over here in the $25 range, which is just off the charts to expect a customer to pay. But once they sit down and they do that modeling, and then they connect that with their targets, they can very quickly see where their break-even point or their profitability point might be, and then that enables them to make some really smart decisions on the architecture and the build. Do they want to build it? Do they want to leverage one of us with what we have already, so that they're not having to put in that type of capital expense? So I think starting on the commercials with the end in mind of what they want to do will allow them to backtrack into some of the decisions that have big dollars potentially surrounding them, and really make a good decision and make sure that they're going to bring something to market that's compelling. Because I never look under the hood. Maybe y'all do if you're in the cars, but I just assume that car is going to work. The engine's going to work when I need to get somewhere.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm with you. I just get in the car and hope it goes. Greg, you were going to come in there.
Yeah, I think Dawn Marie couldn't be more right. And I think one of the things that we've seen over a period of time is that too often the way these projects go is that they start out as a technical activity, and then we wait until we get to, I don't know, if there's 5 stages in a project, we wait until we get to stage 4 3/4, and then somebody drags in the marketing guy or gal. and that's where that starts. But the problem with that is you just spent 6-9 months, whatever the period was that you went through to evaluate the solution, pick your vendor, do all that work and get things going. And now you want sales and marketing to be ready in 30 days. And that's not how it works. And first you got to kind of bring them along in the process and make them understand the value proposition. And the other thing I would say, and I would bet that everybody here will nod their head, is somebody has to figure out sales compensation too. Because if this is a new offer and salespeople don't get paid for it, no one should be surprised that they're not going to sell it.
Right.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sometimes salespeople compete with themselves or with the offers that a company has, and then they're looking at it not what's best for the customer, but what's best for their quota retirement. So if I could sell this and I get this much quota retirement, why would I sell this and only get this much quota retirement? So there's a lot of finesse and strategy behind that needs to be thought through. And Greg's totally right. I'll give you one back since you gave me one. That it needs to be thought of before, that 30 days. And I think if you look at some of the operators that are in the program and the ones that are struggling with actually doing sales, you'll find that piece is missing. So if you're one of them, we're all here to help you. Just call us.
Well, there's always been the struggle with sort of go to market, and as we've moved from legacy systems into sort of new age systems, and I suppose it's exactly the same in the Teams environment. Mark, I haven't come to you yet from the sort of Nuwave side on your next steps, key preparation guidelines for potential operators.
Yeah, I mean, everything that everyone else said is key points, so I won't recap any of that. But what we typically do right up front is we identify all the points of contact, whether that be technical and marketing and business and operational support, all of those pieces, because it's key that when you work with product needs to make sure that they have brought in all the other team members and that it's a holistic approach to onboarding, because we walk everyone through all of those different aspects, for the entire program. And so having those people identified, making sure that they bought off on it, is pretty key. We've onboarded, some legacy tier 1, carriers, and they can take forever just because they're not used to kind of a cloud offering and getting everybody, brought in with a new methodology of understanding how they might deliver the service. And so then that can drag off for, many, many months. And, we have other nimble, smaller carriers that they identify that, and people are wearing multiple hats and they buy off on it. And you can get through the program in 30 to 45 days if everyone is engaged. And the bigger the company that you get into and the less organized they are with bringing all the different departments together, it really takes that time frame out, a long time. And so if you're dealing with a global tier 1, we have one right now that's been in, the program and going through it for, 6+ months. And that's just because of how they haven't, allocated the right people, in the right times and getting everybody together on a schedule, with people being out and those types of things. So there's a lot of different components. And so it's key to identify all the departments, all the key stakeholders, and making sure that everyone's in the know and they all buy off on what they're trying to accomplish so that you can get through the process, pretty quickly. So, that, for me, that's been the key. And we've onboarded, several, key partners, and that's, I think, pieces that they can bring to the table and be ready for is making sure that everyone is on the same page, that they've bought off on it, and they all know their roles and responsibilities in the program moving forward.
Yeah, that sort of administrational logistical consideration is obviously vitally important. I wanted to get the audience's input on another poll question that we were all quite interested in the answer to as well, in terms of, I'm missing a couple of options off that option, in terms of there was supposed to be a no there if you're not considering. So what I was interested in from the audience is, have you already started your Operator Connect application process with Microsoft? And if so, what's your launch timetable? So you've only got 2 options there. There was supposed to be a couple of others that haven't appeared. But we're all interested in, as I said, the sort of uptake of the program. And Mark was mentioning there some of the administrative constraints and how long that might take. So that's something we're interested in. Panelists, while the answers are coming in on that, I wanted to pick all of your collective brains, because you're doing this in the real world. So using the experience that you've gained over the last sort of 18 months, what would be some of your sort of top tips, considerations for potential operators in terms of not just thinking about in advance, but also, and obviously using accelerators is, I'm going to take that all away from you. That would be obviously the #1 tip. And Prabhu, I'll come to you first on that, if that's okay.
Sure, Patrick. I think it's a great discussion. I think particularly the last question around, what are the next steps, I think covered some of the, best practices. And that has to do with, getting all the ducks in a row and understanding all the processes and getting all the different teams aligned and knowing what is needed. Has really helped in the last 18 months. And there have been, cases where like a tier 1 operator was getting dragged for almost a year, and we have jumped in and helped them accelerating. And there have been cases where other operators were able to do that in weeks, and the main difference being them, the second one, knowing exactly what is needed and all that, right? So currently, as we all know, the Operator Connect is a gated program, right? So we have to apply for it and then get approved and all that. And the operators that we found to have the most success are the ones who are all ready to go when they are actually in the program. Right. So I think, and some of the challenges around APIs, securing your engineering IT resources. And I think Greg touched this, I think it's very critical, which is sales incentives. I think we have seen that to be a, big surprise for operators later in the process to know that the sales incentives have to be re-engineered for Operator Connect slightly, right? So all those are critical. So I would say, understand the needs, understand the gaps, and be prepared, and apply to the program, and it could be a smoother progress there.
Yeah, and Greg, I was going to come to you. So we're seeing some of the sort of answers come back on the timeline, and we don't know how long the respondents have already been in the process. But to deploy within 3 months, you're going to have to have done quite a lot of preparatory work. So sort of top tips that you've thought of over the last 18 months for operators?
Well, I think kind of something I touched on earlier, and that is, think of it as a strategic activity. Not just for Operator Connect, but for the future of your SIP trunking business. Because, I mean, as I said, Zoom, WebEx, the other major cloud vendors are going to create similar solutions. The organization needs to be prepared to deliver these services. It's what it means to be competitive. And again, these services from a strategic perspective, right? They take away some of the geographic boundaries that people have, right? So, a cable provider typically would only provide telecom services in their cable footprint. When you start having solutions like this, it's up on a website. Anybody can get services from anywhere or from lots of places. There may be some legal requirements here and there, but it changes, it dramatically changes how services are sold and how they're chosen by customers. And so strategically, you need to start doing this, and it's not like you turn the switch and you're ready to do this. So if you don't start and get this moving, there'll come a day when you're behind your competitors, and then it's very difficult to catch up. Right. So if you're not thinking about this, knowing how most carriers operate and they have long cycles, if you're not thinking about it now, think about where will you be in 2024 or 2025 if you haven't done this.
Well, especially as the industry moves forward. I mean, look at how much press like ChatGPT has gotten over the last couple of weeks, right? Like, I think voice and having access to the call information is similar to any sort of data asset that an organization might have. I see things coming like call recording and AI to give information about, hey, what was interesting about that meeting? How many times did Greg and Don Marie say during their, their answers? What's the follow-up to be? What's the summary? How can I, as the AI tool, just create the next meeting and do the follow-up? I think that's all stuff that's coming, and you've got to have the base line information there, which is the data of the voice at this point in order to do those things, because our modern workers, everyone behind us, the millennials, the Gen Zs, et cetera, they've grown up with this in one hand. They're going to expect to do things differently and, easier than sending an email to 5 people saying, what time can you meet? They're going to want that done for them. And I think the technology is coming quickly on it. So don't lag on getting your voice pieces ready.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're looking at some sort of generational research at the moment, and the requirements and demands for communication and the preferences for how people communicate is going to change dramatically. So that's a particularly interesting point in terms of future proofing. Mark, from the Nuwave perspective, sort of top tips for operators thinking about this, both in terms of joining and once they're involved.
Yeah, I think that Greg hit on it. Is making sure that you're future proofing, that you have a solution for like a menu of different things you can pick and choose, so that if your customers choose to go someplace else to a different cloud platform, that you don't lose them as a carrier or operator, right? You just move them to wherever they need to go. I think that's pretty key. One thing I really haven't heard too is also the security aspects. I think it's key that whoever you choose, you want to make sure that they're rooted in ISO, and especially as we talk about cloud services and those types of things. They have a new 27701 cloud ISO as well, and making sure that any solutions that you're looking to pick up have those things rooted from the security perspective, because as we know security should be first and foremost on your radar, and making sure that again you're future proofed, not only with menu options for technology, but that you're also covered and protected.
Yeah, security is a really key point that's so often neglected in the exciting, shiny technology world. Jeff, last one, tips from down under in the middle of the night for operators?
Yeah, don't do this at 2 a.m. So very much the messaging is, and I agree with what Mark said earlier, I think putting in an accelerator is the simple part. My guidance would be, don't boil the ocean. Don't try and do everything for everyone. We've seen several customers take our platform and just put it in for one part of the business, and then it grows organically. The biggest competitor we face is not the quality players on this call, but it's the we're not going to do anything decision. So be clear about the vision, execute on it. Don't try and do too much too quickly. Get in the market, because if you're not in the market quickly, then it will evaporate. There'll be just too many other players, and that's the experience we see.
But we're coming up. We were aiming for sort of 45 minutes for this webinar, but I wanted to cover just one more question that we get asked regularly from a Cavell perspective, and that circles around differentiation. So obviously, as we've talked about, it's Operator Connect is consume from within Teams Admin Center, and a user or an admin will go through, and there's a list of operators there. How important do you think differentiation is for operators on the program, and sort of how can they go about differentiating themselves? And Dawn Marie, I haven't given you a first question on any of these, so you can take differentiation.
Okay. So if you go out and you look at all the operators that are in that program, and then you select them, each one of them brings you somewhere. And out of the 43 operators that are in the program today, most of them are bringing you to a static web page. What that means is they're just capturing your name, address, phone number, height, weight, lunch preferences, etc. And that's looping through some type of a marketing campaign solution for an inside sales rep to reach back out. I think Microsoft's vision for this, and how operators that are either in the program now or are coming to the program can quickly and easily differentiate themselves, is by ensuring that they have the ability to transact. So if that customer is selecting you out of the Microsoft list, you want the ability to give them information so that they can interact with you, and they quickly can move to a buying decision right then and there. And then they can also quickly move to an activation status right there as well. Because think about Netflix. If you went to Netflix and signed up, but then you couldn't watch a movie for a month, you might not really sign up, and you might go to Hulu or something else instead. So I think that process is really important. And again, for any operators that haven't thought through that, or don't have the capabilities or the development teams to put those pieces together, we're all here to help you. That's what we do. And we want to see you be successful with your customers and engaging with those customers, and procuring them and retaining them.
Yeah, that intuitive user experience, as Dawn Marie said, is probably the sort of vision of the enablement method. And anyone else, any other sort of key tips on differentiation for operators on the program?
Well, I think I'm Zach, who asked a question, so I'm gonna come off of that. I think the mobile space is also an area where we think there's going to be a number of changes, both again strategically with Operator Connect and also with the other cloud vendors. There are a lot of challenges around things like compliance for large businesses. There are issues around how BYOD works today, and control over personal mobile numbers. This is something we've talked about for years, but it's become even a bigger problem for businesses where their sales staff have a personal mobile number, and that is the number that customers have for that individual. And as people exit a business, the customer literally doesn't know who to call. So there's, I think, an opportunity there. And there's also, if you're a mobile network operator today, they're not part of the revenue stream for the most part for these cloud services. Those dollars predominantly go to fixed line providers. And I think particularly in places like the Nordics, I mean, people want their primary number to be a mobile number, but they want that tied into Teams. So I think there's definitely opportunity for things like fixed mobile convergence and mobile first environments that, as Dawn Marie kind of touched on earlier with AI and other things, this is the beginning. It's not the end state.
Yeah, really, really good point. And I think we've discussed this previously, but we did an enterprise study last year and asked about some of the capabilities that Teams Phone Mobile will have, and 97% of enterprises said they'd be interested in assigning a mobile number to a Teams user, for example. So I think there's, like you said, it's potentially the beginning of all of this. I just wanted to touch on this poll quickly. So 57% of those that have answered said that they're planning to be on Operator Connect within 3 months. And I think that we've provided, the experts have provided some really good tips and guidance on how to do that. So we've sort of run up to time here. I wanted massive thanks to all of our panelists, Greg, Dawn Marie, Jeff, Mark and Prabhu for joining us for this conversation, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining too, and for your participation in the polls and the question as well. This session has been recorded, so an on-demand version will be made available. But any other sort of queries or questions at all, please do get in touch with the team, Cavell, and we can look at those as well. Just before I go, I wanted shameless plug of Cavell's Cloud Com Summit, which takes place in London on the 8th of March, and we'll be covering loads more topics like this, focused on the communications industry from the perspective of service providers and operators. So if you found this session interesting, head to our website at cavellgroup.com and check out the event, so that there are still some tickets available. But that's it for this session. Thanks again to all of my panelists, and Jeff for joining in the middle of the night from Australia. Prabhu, I know you've come from the West Coast, and Greg as well. It's relative, and Mark, it's early for you guys. So thank you so much for joining us and providing that insight. You're all free to leave the stage. And again, thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us, and have a great end of the week and weekend.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.